Coming up on The Returned.
I just didn't have anything more to give, and I would be taking my life the next day. And then an angel standing above me, and he was holding out his arm. I reached for his hand, and as I did, he pulled my spirit from my body.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and lightworkers from around the world. Today, we sit with Joanna Oblander, an author, spiritual experiencer whose life changed forever the night she planned to end it all. This is a conversation about despair, divine love, soul agreements, and the realization that even in our darkest moments, we are never alone. Joanna, welcome to The Return.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Joanna, now before we get to the actual heart of our conversation, I like to ground the audience in who you were before your experience. So, what was your life like at the time? And did religion or spirituality play a role in your life or your upbringing?
So, at the time of my experience, I was a mother of 6 kids, 2 of which my husband and I had adopted from Russia. We were self-employed with 2 businesses. Um, I wasn't raised in a religious family, but I was always very much aware that God existed. And so even as a teenager, when a lot of kids rebel, that was something that was really important to me. My relationship with God had always been important to me, and it was then as well. Um, but at the time of my experience, um, a lot of difficult things were going on. I had been suffering from 24/7 migraines for about 13 years at that point. That just took a huge toll, having the 2 businesses to run and 6 kids to handle, and the 2 adopted children had joined our family about, I believe it was about 2 years previous, and when we adopted them, they weren't newborns, they were 4 and 9 years old, and so there was the job, if you will, of helping them learn English, assimilate into our culture. So I guess long story short, I was really overwhelmed with life at that point in time and the deterioration of my health.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine you were running 2 businesses and 6 children. That's unbelievable.
Well, it's not too much if you're healthy. It's a lot if you're
Mhm.
healthy, but I definitely wasn't healthy at that point.
Can you take us through what happened that night?
So what happened that night actually began um, several months earlier and kind of culminated in that day. As I mentioned before, I had been having the 24/7 migraines. I'd had them for several years. I wasn't finding any relief for them. The medications that doctors would prescribe for me had no effect on my migraines. And so even on those days that they just were so severe that my husband would need to take me to the emergency room, shots of Imitrex and like multiple shots in a day or within a few hours, just wouldn't have any effect. They wouldn't give me any relief. And we had 3 customers. At the time, we had a cleaning and restoration business, and so we did restoration for people who had had water damages in their homes or fires or things like that. So the projects could be really significant depending on the amount of damage sustained. And in a short space of time, we did 3 large jobs, and the people ended up declaring bankruptcy on us. So finances were really, really tough, and my health was really, really tough. And I just started slipping into significant, severe suicidal depression. And I just started believing that my family would be better off without me. I just felt like an albatross. I wasn't functioning well. Besides the headaches, I started having other health issues because of all that I was going through, and I was running on adrenaline, and my whole body just started telling me that it had had enough, but I just kept trying to hang in there. And so on that day, a bill collector called me, and I tried to explain to her the circumstances of my life, that I was battling with severe depression, that I was trying to get things together, to get things working again so that I was working again and that we could get our bills paid. And she just let loose on me and told me that I was this horrible person, that I deserved what I got, um, that I was in that position because I wanted to be in that position. And she just went on and on. And I'm just going to preface this by saying I don't blame her. I know that we all have days that we're in a situation that sometimes we even don't understand ourselves, and I suspect that she was having a really horrible day herself. But needless to say, after she let loose on me, I believed everything she told me. It was like she was confirming everything I had been believing about myself in the first place, that I was this albatross, that I was the cause of all my problems. Um, and I just gave up, and I just knew I didn't have anything more to give. I knew that my family would be better off without me. And so I, as I went to bed that night, because I've always had, or my relationship with God has always been really important to me. I knew I had been exceptionally blessed. I had this wonderful husband. I had these children that I loved and adored. Um, the 2 adopted kids had come into our lives because God had guided that journey. I knew He had. I knew the miracle that it was that they had even become a part of our family. So I got down on my knees and I prayed to God and I apologized. I told Him I was sorry that I had given my life everything I had. I didn't have anything more to give. I knew that my family would be better off without me. And I just told Him, whatever you decide to do with me, because my plan was I wasn't doing anything that night, but my full intention was that the next day, after my family was gone to school and to the office, that I would end my life. And so I just told Him whatever He decided to do with me the next day was up to Him. that if he decided to send me to hell, that was fine. I was sure it could not be worse than what I was already experiencing. And if he welcomed me with open arms, that was what I wanted. Um, and I hope that that's what he would do. But I just told him I just didn't have anything more to give, and I would be taking my life the next day. So, do you want me to go on with all right. So, I climbed into bed and, fell asleep briefly, and then I became aware of an angel standing above me, and he was holding out his arm, and I knew that he was motioning for me to take hold of his hand. I understood without hearing him speak that I needed to grab his hand, and I reached for his hand, and as I did, he pulled my spirit from my body, and he then held on to my hand and pulled me through this conduit and into the skies and into space, and as we were in the conduit, I could see everything around us. I could see the stars and the galaxies and just the amazing, amazing beauty of everything that was there. And yet I could also see, even though they were transparent, I could see the walls of the conduit that we were traveling through. And my angel just kept a hold of my hand and stayed just a little bit ahead of me. And I knew that we were traveling very, very quickly, but it was absolutely smooth and serene. Um, I just was able to watch as we traveled and just be so inspired by what I was seeing of everything around me. And within a relatively short amount of time, what seemed like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, we arrived at this complex. And as we arrived there, I could see the the building and the rooms, and we stood um, from the outside, but I only ever saw as though we were looking down from the roof, but it was though there wasn't a roof. I could see into all of the rooms of this complex. I could see everything that was in the rooms and everything that was going on in the rooms. And I recognized this complex. I knew I had been there before. I, as I watched it, I became um, aware of rooms that I was familiar with. I was able to look at certain rooms and know what those rooms were for, and the entire complex was devoted to educating and training those who were there about what certain experiences in life would be like. And we were all preparing for our mortal experience here on this earth. And I just started watching all of the rooms, and I became so engrossed in watching them. I was um, as familiar as I was with the complex. When I started watching and listening, I could look through the walls as though they were transparent. It was like the walls would open up, and I could see the people, excuse me, that were in the rooms and the instructors, and I could hear their conversations. And I was amazed at the subjects. It wasn't like people would think um, of preparing to come to this world. It wasn't, I want a house here with this many kids, or, it wasn't that kind of planning. Instead, it was what experiences would help each of us be better, more loving, more compassionate, to develop our talents more fully, um, to be more like God. And as I watched, I was just s- amazed at how fully and completely we were being taught. And I wasn't a part of one of those classrooms as I watched everything go on, but I was definitely reminded of some of the experiences that I had had. And as I watched, my angel got my attention and directed me that I needed to move my attention away from the classrooms and I needed to look to a room that was to our left. And as I looked at that room, I could see that there was just a male individual in that room with two chairs. And as soon as I saw him, I knew exactly who I was looking at. And even though his back was turned to me, I knew I was looking at God. I recognized him, and I was so amazed at how easily I recognized him and knew his outline and knew what he looked like, even from the back. And as I watched him, I could see that he was watching the door of the classroom, and I could tell that he could see through the walls just like I could, that he could see that there were two individuals approaching the door of that room. And he started moving towards the door. I knew that he was moving to the door to open the door and greet the two individuals that were approaching that room. And as he did, and he opened the door, I saw that the two individuals were myself and my now husband, Greg. And I was amazed. And at that point, all of my memories, all of my knowledge of that realm and that existence that I had been a part of prior to coming to this world were restored. And I was able to remember everything that I had ever been a part of in that realm. I remembered who I knew and all of my associations and all of my interactions and all of my experiences. And I was allowed to remember who I really was. And I
Okay. You may take a moment for sure.
was I was amazed at who I was. I was amazed at how much I was loved. I was amazed at even just the love and the honoring that existed there, the support that we provided to each other, the love and devotion that we had for God, and how sincerely and completely our intentions were to serve him and to be like him, to model his example and be the kind of all loving, all um, accepting being that he was and is. And I sometimes refer to it as a reunion. It was like I was reunited with this amazing individual that was me. And yet, as amazing as I found myself to be, I mean, I knew much more than I would have ever dreamed. I knew. I understood so much more. I had so much more talent and capacity and abilities than I would have ever guessed. And yet all of us were just amazing. Everyone and all of those memories of all of the individuals I interacted with, we were all amazing. We were all extremely gifted, and I just remember that even though we were still very, very much individuals, we we just honored each other. We applauded each other. Anytime we learned something or grew in our abilities, we we honored each other regardless of whether we were more talented or less talented or more intelligent or less intelligent. We just honored all growth, all improvement, all efforts to do good. And that I've just found that so inspiring. And I loved everything that felt there, just the complete love, the way that the love just permeated every fiber of your being. And I just became so engrossed in that. I just loved everything that I was reunited with. And once again, my angel got my attention and directed me to pay attention to what was going on in the room. And so from that point, I began to experience the events that occurred in that room as though I were experiencing them again. As I knew that what I was watching was a meeting that had been held prior to me being born in this world. And so I watched it from beside my angel and I experienced it again as I knew it had happened. But as I experienced it again, I also did so with a portion of my mortal understanding. And so as God welcomed me and my husband, Greg, which in that realm we were not married, but I knew that it had been planned, pre planned, if you will, that when we did come to this earth to have our mortal experience, that we would be together. I knew that that had already been planned. And I understood that my husband, Greg, knew the reason for this meeting, which I did not know the reason for the meeting. And so as God opened the door and greeted us and embraced us, I just melted into his arms and did not want to leave. I just wanted to stay there in his arms and let him hold me indefinitely. Um, but he then, after he gave each of us a warm embrace, he directed us towards the two chairs that were in the room. And there were three of us and two chairs. And he directed Greg to stand behind me and for me to sit in the chair that was opposite the chair that he sat in. And the chairs were very close together, so much so that he was easily able to grasp my hands and to hold them as he talked to me. And he held my hands very gently and very lovingly. And he explained to me that he had asked me to come to this meeting, asked me to be a part of that meeting because he had something very important to ask me. And he began to explain what it was, what my mission would be, and what he was asking me to accomplish. And he explained everything that he was asking and that I was being asked to do. And then he motioned for me to look through the conduit that my angel had brought me through. And it was as though the conduit were completely abbreviated. It was just very easy to look through the conduit and see my life as it would play out if I accepted this request that he was making of me. And I saw everything. I saw everything that would be a part of my life. And he didn't spare any detail. And I knew that what I was watching was conditional, that just like I had the ability to choose there, I knew that our ability to choose in that realm and in this world was critically important. And so I knew that what he was showing me was conditional upon my willingness to turn to him for guidance, to use him as a guide throughout all of my life. And that if I ever rejected him, if I ever turned away from him and chose to reject him or chose to reject his guidance, that what I was seeing would change. I wasn't shown all the variables of how, what would happen if I rejected him. I just knew that if I did, what I was being shown would change. And after I saw everything of what he showed me, I had a lot of anxiety in that moment, which in that realm was not a common experience. I don't know that I can say that I had ever had that feeling before in that realm. Um, we had so much confidence there. We had so much optimism, so much hope, so much belief in our ability to do things. And whatever it was that he showed me, I was really genuinely concerned that I would not be able to accomplish it. And I did not want to fail him. I did not want to accept his request and then fail him. I just started thinking that maybe somebody else could do a better job than I could do. And he was able to read my thoughts, and he looked at me and he said, and he gently squeezed my hands and he said, I would never ask you to accept anything that I didn't know you could and would accomplish. And he said, I would never ask you to accomplish something that you would fail at. And he said, I will always be with you. I will always be there for you. And he said, as long as you remember me, you will succeed. And he reminded me of that several times. He just gently squeezed my hands and he kept telling me, as long as you remember me, you will succeed. And so, in essence, what he was telling me is that as long as I didn't reject him, I was going to succeed. He would help me. He would always be there for me. And he also told me, he said, and Greg will be there with you also, and he will help you. And I knew that what he was telling me was true. Um, I knew that he could not lie. As I looked into his face, um, I was just so amazed at his complete and utter perfection. It's hard to explain in words, but we try to imagine a perfect God because we're told that he is perfect, but you can't describe that perfection that he is. And as I saw his face and I looked at it and I um, knew him both from that realm perspective and then from my mortal perspective, I just looked at his face and I couldn't believe that I had ever been able to forget his face. I was amazed that I had ever been able to forget his perfection and how completely, completely amazing and the depth of my feelings for him. In this world, I've always known he existed. I've just known he did, and I have always loved him, but not like I did there. And so as I thought about everything and everything that he was asking me to accept, um, I decided to accept his request and to accept the mission he was asking me to take on when I came to this world. And when I told him that I would do it, he again squeezed my hands and he said, "You have chosen wisely. Thank you for serving me." And he expressed his love and his confidence in me. And he then rose and ha- had me stand, and he gave me another warm embrace. And once again, I just did not want him to let go of me. I just did not want to ever leave his embrace. But he then showed us to the door, and from that point, I was returned to my body and was not shown the trip back. Um, but once I was back in my body, I was a little disappointed actually, because I had hoped that when I returned, that I would return to a body that no longer had 24/7 migraines or severe depression. But that was not the case. So I returned, but even though I returned to a body that was still experiencing those things, um, I was just ins amazed, and I knew that even though it was gonna be really difficult because I still had those depressed feelings and, and the headaches, um, it just gave me that extra strength, that extra understanding that I needed to hang on and battle through that. And and eventually I got through that and found healing.
Joanna, I want to start off by saying, what does it feel like to be yanked out of your body by an angel?
It's pretty effortless, actually. It's amazingly effortless. I don't think that yanked even describes it very well. It's just like maybe being lifted is a better way to describe it. It was just like he just pulled me out, and it was completely painless, and um it seemed really natural.
Do you think that's what it's like when we actually die? Would you, just as a guess? I mean, I know we can guess, but do you think that's what it would be
Yes, I
like?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's from what I've experienced, I would say to leave our bodies is actually a pretty joyous experience. To return to our bodies, not necessarily.
Absolutely agree. Your story has so many interesting avenues, and I just wanted to ask a couple questions just prior to till I get started. But conduit, is that meaning when you say conduit, is that like a tunnel to you?
Yes. It's
It
like
is?
a
Okay.
tunnel or a round circular pathway that has
Okay.
walls.
Okay. Right. Okay. And then when you say complex, is that like housing type of
No, it's
looking
like a
things or
huge it was like a huge building that sprawled out for, I would say, blocks, speaking in mortal terms, um, filled with hallways and rooms. It was just they're probably, I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure because so much of what I was shown there many things I was allowed to remember as far as the details, um, of what I was looking at and how I felt as I looked at them. I've been allowed to remember everything I felt, but I have not been allowed to remember everything I saw, if that makes sense. So, like everything I was shown of my life, I wasn't allowed to remember anything that I was shown. Um, who I interacted with other than my husband, Greg, I don't know who I saw and who I interacted with. Um, I I can I can vaguely picture some of the scenarios in the classrooms, but I can't remember um, what all of the subjects were, but I know a lot of them were like, what would it be like to have cancer? Or would it be like to be born with a handicapped? Or what would it be like to be born into, say, say to a parent who had some sort of issue, an emotional issue, or that sort of thing. But the complex, it was just large, and I would guess that maybe there were other complexes just like it, but I don't know that for sure.
I'm going to get this question out of the way because I know the audience will be wondering and asking. So I'm going to get it right out of the way. What does God look like? That's
And
always something they want to know. And they'll be like, you didn't ask what
right.
God looked like.
And I have not been allowed to remember the exact details of his face, so I would not be able to sit down and give a sketch artist the description. I just know that his face was perfect, and not in the sense of, um I couldn't say that he was the most handsome face I've ever seen. He just was the most perfect face I've ever seen. And when I see paintings of Jesus, this will probably not make sense, but when I look at a painting of Jesus, it's not necessarily that I'm seeing the features that I remember of seeing in God. It's more like it's portraying the feeling that I sensed in his presence. Does that make sense? So there are certain paintings that it's like, yeah, they get they get the awe, they get the reverence. I can really relate to that painting or that depiction. Um, and there are several that I would say do that for me, and there's been a few that I've seen that they were just their impact on me is profound, I guess. One of them is the painting of the that the little girl did. I never can remember her name. Um, but there are others also, and again, it's not so much that I feel like I'm seeing the exact features, it's that they're capturing the reverence.
Very interesting. In my own NDE, I had Jesus show up there. And I can't I too cannot remember. Not that I can't remember, maybe I'm not supposed to, but I knew what he was wearing, vaguely can see his face, but that wasn't it just isn't there, the details. Just like you had just explained, I couldn't sit down and tell a sketch artist. But then sometimes I see it in others as in other paintings or pictures as well, but not quite what
Right.
it's very strange because you know what it looks like, but you can't actually put it to words, right?
Right. Right.
Very
And I feel
interesting.
like if I ever did see the actual his actual face, a perfect depiction, I would know it, right? I would recall that, but I feel that I feel like that this earth life is to be such a learning experience that so many of those things that I experienced and that I've talked with other people who have had an NDE, um, we just realized that some of that is kept from us, if you will, or removed from our memory just so that we can get the full learning experience here.
Okay, that makes sense. That's interesting. So, in your opinion, where you went, where the complexes were, do you think that would be a place we would go after we die? Or is that strictly where we are, say, pre-birth?
That is a great question. And I suspect that after we die, that we will be able to go back there. I know that there's individuals still there, but travel is such it's so easy, right? I mean, when you think of the distance that I had to have traveled with my angel, um, I know that I traveled an incredible distance, well beyond the galaxy. I know I traveled through multiple galaxies. Um, and so to be able to travel that kind of distance with no effort, basically, I'm at least I don't understand what the effort was that was involved, but to so easily travel without the sensations of travel, without the toll, if you will, of that kind of distance. I mean, if I flew halfway around the world in an airplane, it would take me a day to recover from the jet lag, right? Um, there just wasn't that. So I think that um, my personal feeling is that, and part of this is because I know now, I didn't know at the time of my experience, but I know now that the angel who took me back to that existence was my grandfather. And um, and and I know that he kind of kept his face away from me so that I wouldn't recognize him, even though he was, as an angel, he appeared to be about 30-ish years old, and I didn't ever know my grandpa at that age, but I loved my grandpa so much, and he was such a father figure to me that, um, and I know that I knew during the whole experience that somehow my angel knew me and that he loved me very much. And so I think that my personal belief, and it's a very strong personal belief, is that our loved ones, our family members, are always assisting us from the other side. Those that are still waiting to be born and those that have passed on.
I love that. I love that so very much. You know, I wrote a note down here, and at one point you were saying that you could see through the walls. So could God. But I wanted to actually ask this because it came to mind. When we're here on Earth, do you feel that they're watching us like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I think that there, uh, um, I know from my experience there, and even from experiences that I've had with God here, that we're always respected, that we're always allowed to choose. But I know that anytime that we're willing to ask for help, they are anxious to be able to assist us.
And how would you say one could ask for help? Like, could you give us an example how we could ask for help without begging? Yeah.
Well, when I so I think obviously prayer is one, but for me, prayer is not like something I take out of scriptures and repeat the same words over and over. My prayers now are very much personal conversations. I, you know, where where probably before my experience, even though I knew God was there, I just I just felt like that he was too busy, he was probably too busy to really deal with me, right? And so now I don't understand how he does it. I just know that with every single one of us, we're treated like we're an only child, and that he has the ability and the resources, however he makes that work. I don't even spend time trying to figure that out. I just know that he can and he does. And and so I will have conversations with him and say, and at the same time I will try to be willing to listen. I think listening for his response is a whole new learning curve, but instead of just saying, "Hey, I really want this and this and this and this," it's like, "Please help me understand what it is you're wanting me to do right now. Please help me understand how I'm supposed to go about this. Please help me understand how I'm supposed to fill in the blank, um, so for example, I just finished a children's book and um, it was a long process. From the time that I did the photo shoot to the completion was about 8 years. And there were many times that I would kind of throw up my arms and say, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this. You let me know I'm supposed to do this. I can't figure out how to make this particular page happen. I was doing the illustrations. I had already written it. The writing part was pretty easy. The illustration part was not so easy. And so
I
it's
swear
like,
God was probably sitting there going, "Please help me understand why it took you so long."
yes. Well, and but the whole process ended up being so amazing in the end, because I would say, okay, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how, like on several of them, most of the pages were composites. They were multiple photographs or stock art pulled together to make it look like one image. And so I would look at one and I say, okay, the original picture we took of this isn't exactly working. How can I work with this, not lose the picture, still use the photograph, and pull this into the page in a way that makes it look like it belongs and it makes sense for the reader when this book is done? And every single time. It may not be instantaneous because that's not how God works. He allows us to grow, right? He wants us to grow and to learn. But I would get these little messages to my mind. Go look here. Go do this. Look this up. And every time I did that, there would be an answer.
Sometimes all it takes is listening, hey?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree. I really do. Now, Joanna, you were shown that souls choose aspects of their lives, I should say, before coming here. How did that change the way you view suffering and hardship now?
It dramatically changed it. Um, One of the things that I saw as I watched the classrooms were two men, and in that classroom, they were being taught what it would be like to have cystic fibrosis. And this one man looked to his friend and he goes, and they're both kind of looking at each other and shaking their heads. And he goes, I think this would work for me. And of course, I'm looking at this as I'm watching that with a mortal perspective, and I'm thinking, wait, do you have any idea what you're signing on for? um, and yet, some of the things that I now know that I signed on for, i- from a mortal perspective, we would never, we would never choose that, right? We would not choose to go through 15 years of 24/7 migraines. I'll just give myself as an example. If I were choosing prior to my near-death experience, I would say a really nice tropical vacation would be nice, you know?
Oh, yes, it was.
Children that learned the very first time I taught them something, that would be nice,
That
all of
would be,
those things.
wouldn't that be? Oh,
Yet, that wasn't the criteria that we were using. We were wanting to choose those. It wasn't a matter of whether we lived a long time or a short time, whether we were beautiful or not, whether we were short or tall, whether we were rich or famous or poor and nobody knew who we were. That just didn't matter. What mattered was what we could learn from it and what we could gain from that learning. And one of the things that I have found is that as I watch people go through their difficult experiences, none of us really love as we're going through those experiences. But as we get to the other side of those experiences, very few people I know would give up that experience for what they learned. And I just feel like that's an inherent understanding that we have of we're not really here to have a vacation. We're here to learn. But it's just so true that um, it's our difficult moments that bring out the best in us if we allow them to. And again, that becomes a choice too. And sometimes knowing that most, if not all, of what we experience, as far as what I will call the major things, I'm not going to say that we choose to be in a car accident or, I don't know. I don't know what exactly everybody chooses, but I know that all of us have chosen difficult experiences and that we know that, and we knew then that they would be difficult, and we were given as much education, for lack of a better word, as we could be given there to assist us to get through this. And sometimes I think it's just that um, we come with this inner knowledge sometimes of like, I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get through this, but I know I'm going to get there.
When I hear more about these heavenly kind of classrooms, if you will, and the basically prepping before you come to Earth, it kind of makes me think that our human life is far more purposeful than we even realize.
Absolutely.
But however, having said that, at some point in life, we kind of hit this. I've noticed only for myself that do you feel like we kind of start returning to ourselves at a certain time? It's like we start going, hey, what's this all about? Like you're in your 20s or even your teens and then your 20s and early 30s, and you're just like, meh, I take corners on two wheels. I don't care. A lot of people are like that, and then all of a
Right.
sudden it's like, wait a minute. What is this thing we're doing? What is this life? It's like all of a sudden a remembering comes. So do you think that something is put there to trigger that remembering for maybe that purpose we have on this earth?
I think that I'm going to use this word. So the loved ones that assist us from the other side, I'm just going to call them angels because I think they are our angels. Um, I think that they try to communicate to us much more than we realize. And I think that sometimes we are really um, cooperative. And I think other times we are really not cooperative. I think that sometimes we're really teachable and sometimes we're really not teachable. And when we are teachable, then I think as we allow them and God to do our work, to do their work, His work through us, things become amazing. Things have not that they become this really easy, no challenges life, but it all just becomes um,
It
meaningful.
does become easier and more meaningful.
Yeah,
That sometimes we're learning lessons over and over and over again
right,
because we're refusing to learn the first time, you know?
right.
And I bet you they're up
Yeah,
there going, "Oh my gosh, here we go again. Send her another sign," like, you
right.
know?
Well, and the thing that I think is amazing and wonderful is that I know that from the other side, everything I observed, they are way more patient with us than we are with ourselves.
To hear that because they must have a heyday with me. I'm not kidding. So, we'll just leave it at that. But
Okay.
Joanna, after experiencing such unconditional love at that level, and I seen you, that brought you to tears even still to this day. That feeling. How did you how were you, I should say, able to return to this life without that? I mean, you have it always, but I mean, come into this life where that unconditional love isn't so present as it was there.
So number one, um, I really didn't have the choice. I was just returned. But in all honesty, if I had been given the choice, and I think that's probably why I wasn't given the choice, they already knew what my choice would be. I understand to uh, to a degree that I think few people have been privileged to have just how crazy important this life is. Just just how meaningful it's meant to be and um how much we are dependent on to serve each other. I know that God is always working to do his work in this world. And I know because he's so completely perfect that if if all of us decided today that we weren't going to do another good thing, we weren't going to serve him, we weren't going to do anything, he could do whatever he needed to do all by himself. And he doesn't need us, right? But we need him. And so I feel like that he just mercifully allows us to be a part of the process, but that process for each of us is really a divine process. It's really a learning process. And by each of us searching out and understanding what he's entrusted us to do, and then working to accomplish that, we are in essence not only helping ourselves. Hopefully, when we're doing it to serve those around us more than we're trying to serve ourselves. But everybody gets served in the process. It's like um, volunteering at the hospital and holding ill babies or something like that. Those babies need that love and that snuggling. But you never know of a single person who walks away from that experience of holding those babies that they don't feel like the babies gave them something priceless in return. And I think that that's the kind of world we can create if we're all intent on serving our personal purpose that we've been entrusted with.
That takes me to a place in your story where you talk about learning who you truly are beyond this identity. So, what do you believe we fundamentally are?
I think we're amazing beings. I think that um, it's hard to explain, but I just know that what I was shown of myself, I I knew so much more than what I understand here. So in this world, I will just confess I'm not a huge science fan, right? So I really don't care if I know everything about chemistry. I, I really don't care if I don't understand perfectly the human body, even though I actually am a pretty diligent student of health anymore, ever since I've found healing. But those kinds of things just don't resonate with me in this sphere of existence. There, it's like I knew all of that. I understood all of that. It was just profound how much I understood and had a total grasp of. And I know that once all of that intelligence is restored, I feel like it's there with me now. I feel like everything I have ever learned is with me. It's a part of my spirit. I just know that um, it's not completely accessible. And so, who knows how much I learned here in this world that I'm actually relearning. I don't know that I already knew, but there's a difference between what we comprehended and were able to do there and this mortal experience. There's just something incredibly important. Like people will ask me, "Are you afraid to die?" And I will tell them, "No, I am not afraid to die at all. I welcome that opportunity to return, but I will never, ever contemplate rushing that event. I want to make sure that when I return, I am returning knowing that I gave God my very best effort with everything he asked me to do, and that I didn't cut short anything, that I just did. I gave this my best effort."
And I know you are, right? I can totally feel that from you. So, why do you feel you needed to have this experience? Have you ever thought about that?
I have. I feel that the reason that God intervened in my behalf is because I do have important things that He's depending on me to accomplish. And He knows, and I know where I was, that place that I was in that night that I prayed to Him. He knows that I really would have followed through. And so I feel like He gave me this incredible, priceless gift of understanding that even though I still had to go through a couple of years of severe depression and 24/7 migraines, there was a plan in place that would allow me to find healing. Um, that's kind of a whole nother story. My husband was inspired to go back to school and become a chiropractor. And because he was willing to listen to God and go back to school, I got to find healing. And so now I just get to work every day at doing what I feel like I'm being guided to do.
Beautiful. Isn't that the dream for everyone, right? I wish everyone could do that. So, Joanna, for those who deeply resonate with your story, your message, and want to connect further, can you share your published work, services, offerings, and where people can find you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's joannaoblander.com. I have written one book. Well, now I guess I've done two books, but one book is published. It's called A Glimpse of Heaven, One Woman's Life-Altering Visit with God. The second book is soon to be published. It is a children's book. Um, they'll both be available on my website and on Amazon. My first book is already on Amazon. My second book is called Where Did Grandpa Go? And it shows grandpa um, dying, leaving his family, and then his continuing interactions with them, even though they don't know that he's with them. But
Love
he
that so
he
much.
he assists them from the other side, helps them find lost papers, cheers for them as they're at sporting events. Just I won't share the entire book, but that it's been a work of love, a really big learning curve, but a work of love, and I'm just waiting to receive confirmation that it's been copyrighted, and then that will be released. And then I'm working really hard to put together a website that will be called Life Builders to help people build their lives based on everything I know to be true.
Beautiful work. Beautiful work. Is that your mission that you're fulfilling for God right now?
Yes.
Do you think? Yes. Did you remember your mission when you came back?
No.
No, not that easy, right?
No.
Yeah. It's like,
No, I
no, you
knew
just
that,
can't tell me, right?
right. I knew that I was to write the first book. Um,
Right.
and and I had thought because of I was actually told to write my first book when I was searching for my adopted kids. And I thought the book was going to be about that experience of being told to find them and then the search, which took 6.5 years. But instead, God had different ideas, and it was also to include my near-death experience. So, yeah.
Right.
that was the first part, and then, he just I wanna I feel like he's very kind and merciful from the standpoint he doesn't show us the big picture all at once, because I think some days that would be really overwhelming. Instead, it's like, "Okay, open this door. This is your scenario for right now. This is what I'm asking you to do, and we'll get through this room, and then we'll open the next door, and you can see the next piece that I'm asking you t to do and to be a part of."
Right. Oh, I know that feeling all too well. So, because you're on the returned, we have a signature returned question I like to pop on everybody just when they think they're just about done. What truth did you return with that you want humanity to know right now?
I would say that what I returned with and what I would want everybody to know is that God knows us completely, perfectly. He loves us completely, perfectly, and He is there for us 24/7 if we're willing to reach out
And listen.
and listen. Thank you for adding that.
Oh,
That was an
yeah.
important piece.
Joanna, it has been such a pleasure. Your story is so in depth, and I'm going to get your book for sure so I can actually read it in your words. But I want to thank you for coming on today, sharing your story with such honesty and vulnerability. Your experience is definitely a reminder that even in the moments where someone feels most lost, unseen, or broken, there still may be something greater holding them through it all. So
Right.
thank you for bringing your light, your truth, your courage to the return today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You betcha. And to everyone watching, may this conversation be a gentle reminder that life has meaning. And even when you can't see it, yet sometimes the people closest to giving up are standing at the edge of transformation. Wherever you are today, don't make permanent decisions from temporary darkness. Thank you for watching and sorry. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.